We're down in Poole this morning on a very grey and breezy November day because back in September at the Southampton Boat Show we saw the UK debut of Schaefer. Now the boat they had there, courtesy of Gibbs & Marine, was the V33, and that's quite a departure for Schaefer because traditionally over the last 30 years as the biggest motorboat manufacturer in Brazil, and they've tended to concentrate on everything from compact kind of 26 to 30 foot sports boats right up to quite premium complex luxury motor yachts beyond the 80-foot mark. So the V33, as you can see, is a major tangent for them, a kind of open med style day boat along the lines of a Fjord, if slightly smaller. And rather cleverly, Gibbs chose to take two of these to the Southampton Boat Show. This one, the stern drive version with the D4 320 under that sun pad, and this one, the outboard version with a pair of Mercury's 4.6 litre V8 300s on the transom.
I don't mind a little bit of engine noise when it's that kind of engine noise. I mean, there is some relatively hard impact. This feels like a bit of a go-kart in its own way.
Now let's take a little walk up the side of this boat because it's a very pretty thing. Get ourselves all the way to the bow here. You see it's got a pretty much a plumb bow and quite a fine entry. At the same time, there's a decent sort of swelling to the forward quarters of the hull there. It's not overdone, it's by no means excessive. It's still a very attractive boat. But once we get it out on the water, it'd be interesting to see what kind of dynamic there is, how the balance between the fine entry, the softness of a ride, and the bow buoyancy works. Certainly appears to generate some decent inboard space. The colour here, incidentally, is Porsche blue. It looks fantastic in the sunlight, but that's in short supply today. And of course, as a premium luxury day boat, you can have any colour you want, match it to your car. I wouldn't personally do that because my car is a 15-year-old Toyota covered in dents and dirt. But it certainly looks and feels quite premium from this perspective. So let's jump straight on board and see if it carries that through from the inside. Now, when you step on board on this outboard powered boat, of course, there's limited space compared to the stern drive version. But what we do have is a little folding section above the engine well. So you can trim those engines right out. But you can still make your way from side to side without actually having to go into the cockpit. There's a swim platform on both sides, equal sized platforms, with a telescopic ladder to starboard and symmetrical access into that cockpit. And actually, while we're talking about symmetry, let's get this gate open. What's really interesting straight away here is the ease of movement on board. I mean, they've chosen a walk-around layout with central furniture all the way up the centre. And they've left tremendous space for these side decks. And if I point it down on my feet, you'll see there's a huge amount. I mean, we're talking about perhaps 20 inches, best part of 2 feet wide, which is impressive. And it's not only wide, they've actually used various devices to ensure that all that width is fully available. It's not stolen by various fixtures and fittings. For instance, we've got this recessed area beneath the gunnel there, so that you can slot in your uprights for the canvases for the aft sunshade. You could also use that as rod holders, of course. And just back here, we've got a little fold-down teak step with a little deck light, which is a nice touch, so you can get on and off. Makes more sense than a moulded step that steals your space. But having said that, if you look on top, it lines directly up with your sunken cleat and your fuel filler So it'd be good to see those two kind of staggered so that you step up onto a clean bit of gunnel with a bit of machined tread plate, so it's much easier to get on and off at the side. That said, if we go to the other side here, we'll see that the shore power is also neatly recessed into that space. So ease of movement all over this boat is very, very good indeed. And it's made all the more so, I'll go over to the other side because it's left cluttered. It's made even more so, and this is quite a surprise to me, given that Schaefer is very much a builder of cruise boats. You'll see that the entire side deck is one level. Now it's easy to imagine, isn't it, that a designer famous for building cruising boats would integrate a kind of step up to a foredeck just to increase volume down below. They haven't done that. It's single level all the way forward. So it's very clear that rather than doing what they've done over the past 30 years and optimise the boat's capacity to provide overnighting facilities for you, they've really committed to the day boating ethos. These big decks wrap all the way around the foredeck, where we have some integrated sun loungers there with little armrests and sloping backrests. Nice high quality stuff with some rather elegant classical kind of luggage tie down straps to keep these cushions from blowing away while we're out at sea in this breeze. And if we make our way back into the cockpit itself, you'll see it's not just ease of movement that impresses, it's actually the way this kind of leisure-friendly day boating cockpit is arranged. Now, clearly, what we have at the heart of this cockpit is a 6-man dining station. It's very, very nicely built. You can lift up this backrest and extend the sun pad right aft over that engine well. And you can fold out this heavyweight table. And you see it's resting on kind of a steel bracket, so there's absolutely no give there at all, no play whatsoever. It's rock solid. And then we've got a remotely operated brace for that table, which is all done, I think, yeah, from the hardtop. Hit that button and down it goes into the space. And once it's there, you simply load the infill cushions and it gives you a very large area to relax. What I particularly like though, and I didn't really get the point of this at the Southampton Boat Show, is the fact that when this whole area is rigged as a sunbed and perhaps someone is up here at the wet bar preparing drinks and so on, you could take this aft facing backrest and simply rotate it, which gives you a kind of drinks tray, both for the people who are reclining on the sun lounger aft, and also there's a place for the guy at the wet bar to turn around, pop little nibbles and drinks and so on. And when you actually inspect the wet bar a bit more closely, it's easy to see that this is very much a boat optimised for that day boating experience. Now on the top we've got a moderate size of sink in stainless steel. Next to that, a really, really deep kind of cooler, a cool box. Drained, of course, so you can just fill this with ice, chuck your wine and your beer in there, and it will keep you going for a very long day out. It's at least, I'd say, a couple of feet, 2.5 feet deep. Really big capacity. And then over here on the port side of the wet bar, we've got a space for a barbecue. Now, it's not been rigged with that because it's the first boat into the country and there wasn't one available for the same kind of supply issue reasons that a lot of the boats at the Southampton Boat Show were not completely finished. But you can rig this with a barbecue or else just have a little recess for a camping stove, a portable gas camping stove. Down below, we've got a good size of fridge, and we also have a neat little recess in here for your glasses. Well, I say glasses, rather sensibly, they are plastics. but it's nicely arranged. And then to the side of that, a little space for a dedicated bin. Now if we turn our attention back to this central dining station, this boat is designed for 10 people, and it's easy to see that there's lots of space for them to sit and enjoy this boat. It's got a beam of nearly 11 feet, and even though you've got those wide side decks, the central furniture is a really good size, because actually the bulwarks are not especially wide, so that that beam is very well used on the inside. As you can see, you can reverse that forward backrest, and that gives you 6 forward-facing seats, plus an additional couple of very generous helm seats, so that's 8 forward-facing seats after the helm console, and that's pretty impressive, very practical. It's also worth thinking about the impact of the outboard engines on your day on the water though. Now, there are all kinds of reasons why people might prefer outboards to inboards, but if you select the outboards, then one of the chief benefits, aside from the performance and the looks and so on, is likely to be the fact that you get lots of underdeck storage that you wouldn't otherwise have, because of course the engine would be under that deck. Now if we head forward and lift the hatch to reveal the space beneath that deck. Now, if we get on our hands and knees and look into that space, you can see that's seriously enormous. Right down into the bottom of the hull, you see the stringers there, and it's pretty much empty. You see we've got a tank on the port side, and we've got the same size of tank on the starboard side, 250 litres each, because of course we've got the twin outboard engines. Sorry, 350 litres each, I should say, 700 litres in total. So for, you know, a day boat, that ought to give us a tremendous usable range, much more than you'd necessarily expect. That's a great space, but actually this space is also available on the inboard boat, because the engines, if I come down here, slot in here, and as you can see that space is entirely vacated, so that is a huge area. My problem with it is, and I'll illustrate this by climbing down into this gap down the little steel ladder. Okay, there we are. Now you can see this enormous space is all fully available, but you can also see, if I come up here, that it's screwed shut. Now they have the rams in stock at Gibbs Marine to turn this into an opening hatch, and of course on the inboard boat, because you need access to the engines, this hatch does open, so I see absolutely no reason why this should be screwed shut. And if I was going to buy the boat, I'd absolutely insist that it opened, because if it does, then basically you've got a tremendous size of space all the way through here. That means you can chuck an inflated tender down here, you can chuck down your stand-up paddleboards without having to deflate them and pack them away in compact bags. It just makes your day on the water so much easier. I'd still like to see a few dedicated trays instead of just naked stringers to contain your various bits and bobs. But you rarely, if ever, see a bigger storage space under your main deck than this. Now if we move forward into that bow space, as we've seen, we have this elegant, nicely contoured 2-man sun lounger. We also have armrests that fold down, and they have built-in cup holders, draining cup holders, but interestingly there's no exit hole in this armrest, so presumably these cup holders drain seawater directly into the insides of your armrest, which is of course not ideal, so a bit of finessing is probably required there. And if we come forward, you'll see that we can lift this forward hatch. I'll just lock that in place. That's nice and sturdy, gives you a big aperture opening, plenty of light down there like this, easy to get your luggage down if this is the way you want to do it. But at the moment, as one of the earliest boats that Gibbs has brought into the country, there's no catch on here, no lock, so it's a simple piece of fiberglass that moves up and down quite freely. Let's loosen that off and shut it. So that again needs a little bit of finishing. And then the anchor is an interesting piece of work as well. And in the trailing edge of that we have a nice little cabinet, which is good for your lines, fire extinguisher. And if we open the locker up itself, you'll see that we have a neat little fold-out anchor which comes out over the bow like that and then tucks away when not in use. Now I've done that manually just so I can show you, but it's actually easy to operate either from the controls down here or from the helm, but you do of course have to open that door first. I don't know whether they've done it to preserve the rather lovely aesthetic in this boat or whether they've done it to minimise the overall length, but either way it's quite a welcome feature. It looks very cool. So far so good, and the day boating credentials on first inspection of this boat look very, very strong indeed. So let's pop down into the cabin and see how that impacts on our overnighting space. Now when we come down, the light's quite impressive. In this forwardmost section, as you can see, we're basically drawing the edge of that sunbed up top, but there are windows all round to give you tremendous light. And as I say, if you lift that, the light in the forwardmost part is excellent, good for getting the air through too. So if the weather's a bit nasty, you could lock it slightly open and just sit down here and relax a little till it eases off. So further aft, in this central lounge space, I see the mouldings lift in tandem with the helm console, give you headroom of about 6'1", and we have an additional window that just gives you a sight of the horizon above that gunnel. These other windows, of course, give you a sight of nothing but fiberglass and shins. On some boats you see the inclusion of external windows built into those bulwarks, which makes a lot of sense. Not so here. What I like about this central section, apart from the headroom and the relative openness of it, is the fact that the materials are so very good. Here in particular we have a kind of it's like a sideboard topped with a fabric that feels somewhere between cork and suede, kind of grippy, soft touch. Very lovely to look at and feel, and very practical, I think, for keeping things still while you're underway. We also have a little cabinet under here. We kind of a heavyweight ball bearing system for opening and closing the catches, which is much heavier duty than you might expect to see, and the doors themselves are very heavy duty too. It's very beautifully built, and so it should be. As I say, they've been building boats for 30 years and they have their own internal upholstery and carpentry department. Plus the boats themselves are designed by the founder of the company, Schaefer, so they have a lot of control over what they do, and it shows. Move slightly further aft here, another little ball bearing catch, swing that open, and below the deck there we've got the switch panel, very neatly arranged again, plus an additional bin, and to starboard, in addition to a storage unit here, which is again very heavy duty and well put together, we have a starboard heads compartment. Well, I say heads compartment, so just get these infill cushions out of the way so we can have a proper look. Well, it's got a compact opening porthole for a bit of air and ventilation, an electric loo, and a shower fitting there, so you can use it as a wet room. And again, the headroom is decent, 6'1", I'd say, a good inch above my head. There's also a compact sink and a bit more storage under there. It would be good to see, though, in this ceiling section, a little skylight, a little frosted skylight, because if we pop outside and have a look at the console top, we'll see that there's only a compass there, and that could easily be slightly relocated. There's plenty of space for a little skylight, and it would transform the way that heads compartment feels. Nonetheless, given the kind of day spaces we're able to enjoy out here, you'd have to say that that cabin is a very capable overnighting space. And the helm station feels equally high spec, equally sophisticated, As I said, we got a couple of really big helm seats here. They've got a kind of bolster built in, so if I just operate this one hand, we should be able to swing that down. There we are. So we've got one higher level one, and jam your back into that in the standing position, where you can sit down in a more leisurely stance, enjoy the drive, with a couple of cup holders on either side, and a couple of foot braces teak-lined, moulded into the helm console, plus an adjustable steering wheel here, so you can really refine that position. If I come into that position, everything is pretty much as you would have it. We've got a nice little brow over our chart plotter and our engine display to keep the glare off, which is quite handy, because often with a glossy black surface you do kind of mirror the sun when it's shining overhead. It's good, and it's open, and the views are great. What I don't like though is the scale of these units here. It's so substantial, it's almost like it's designed to hold up a flybridge, but it holds up nothing but the screen itself. So I can't help feeling, even though it's kind of rimless around the top and the sides, that Schaefer could come up with a much more elegant solution than this.
Now on this diesel boat, the pickup's actually pretty decent. As I say, we're hitting 20 knots in about 10 seconds. 30 knots, which is basically the top end. That takes another 20 seconds or so. But what's quite impressive here is that as I'm doing around about, what, 28 knots, we're drinking about 56 litres of fuel per hour, so about 2 litres per nautical mile. And that figure of around about 2 litres per nautical mile, that doesn't really change whether we're doing 20 knots or 30 knots. So that's pretty impressive. That's certainly not something that the twin outboard V33 is going to be able to match. And with a single inboard diesel, the D4320, which is never going to be a particularly quick boat, 30 knots is about as much as we'll get out of her. But she certainly behaves perfectly well on that. She's a very stable boat, quite a wide beam, relatively shallow hull angles, reasonably fine entry, as I say. So she feels quite efficient, she feels quite stable, and there's a good wind running today, sort of 15 knots southerlies gusting to about 28, and we're not needing to do much at all with the trim tabs, just a little adjustment here and there, and she takes to that very well. She's very responsive to it. And actually, having criticised the stanchions for that screen, the fact that the screen is set back a good distance on the leading edge of this console, and it must be about 4 or 5 feet away from your helm position, means that the impact of those thick black units is actually not that critical. There's plenty of decent visibility here. And although you kick up a little bit of water from that bow that finds its way inboard in these pretty robust beam winds, although that screen's a long way away, it does intercept the vast majority of it, and in the seating position here, I'm getting no real wind hitting me in the head. But the truth of the matter is that this looks like a bit of a performance machine from the outside, quite an exotic kind of med-style day boat. So the vast majority of people are going to want a little bit more than 30 knots. They'll probably want to get there a little bit quicker than 30 seconds as well. So let's ease ourselves back down, find the other V33 with those twin 300s and see what she's got to offer. So we've made the transfer to the outboard model now, a pair of Mercury 300s. You can also apparently spec this with a single V12 600 or even a pair of 350s if you like. But I'm told by the guys at Gibbs Key Marine Sales that with these twin 300s on the transom, this should be good for around about 44 knots. So let's get her up and running and see how she does. Not a lot of bow lift. Good bit of noise though from those fruity V8s aft. I don't mind a little bit of engine noise when it's that kind of engine noise. 38 knots, cruising along there, nice bit of trim. Yeah, like the inboard model, this is a very easy boat to set up in terms of your trim tabs and your leg angles. Running very smoothly and efficiently now. The waterline's a good distance back. And actually, even on this boat, what are we doing now? 40 knots. We're seeing about 150 litres disappearing from our fuel tanks. So that's the best part of 4 litres per nautical mile. But if I ease her back to around about 30, and drops significantly. We dip below 3 litres per nautical mile, around about 26, 28 knots, even going down towards around about 2.5 litres per nautical mile, well under 3 anyway. Now that's much more sustainable. But if you're choosing to make the transition from the inboard boat to the outboard boat, that's probably not what you really want to be doing with it. So I'll give her a little turn to starboard and we'll head back out and have a bit of a play. We're heading up now past 43 knots. As I say, the waterline's well aft. That fine entry is enjoying itself. Everyone's very comfortable, everything's very secure and stable. Little wash coming through here, see how that does. Oh, that's very good. Wash from the other side as well. Quite confused seas just here actually. So we'll power through them and see how she goes. Yeah, there's nothing to worry about there. It's funny, though I guess fairly predictable, that while that diesel boat feels stable and refined and reliable and well behaved and stoic and all the other things that enable you to just settle down and relax into your day of family day boating. This feels like a bit of a go-kart in its own way. Now most owners of this boat will be unlikely to be using her in these kinds of conditions. But if you use it a little exercise, I mean there are some relatively hard impacts. If you slightly get it wrong and land on her side a touch, for the most part, she's very well behaved. And because you've got that kind of throttle response, that instant grunt, you can really drive her to the conditions quite effectively. And she might be a very pretty med-style day boat. She might look like she belongs on the Côte d'Azur, but she handles, she really does. So there it is. This is the kind of boat you can mess around with on flat water on happy summer days. Or it's the type of boat where you can get caught in 4-footers and nasty Solent chop, and you've got all the grunt and controllability you need to drive it to the conditions. Yeah, in the absence of a proper bow flare, it can get a little bit wet in the following sea if you get it wrong, as I just did. But at the same time, it's a really game little driver's boat. And for a big, beamy day boating platform like this, that's quite impressive.
Well, that was a tremendous amount of fun in terms of its calibre as a day boating platform, in terms of its style and finish, in terms of its helming experience. It's just such an easy boat to enjoy. Of course, from an overnighting perspective, it's slightly flawed. Certainly at this kind of size and this kind of price, around about £345,000 including VAT, there are plenty of boats that have the beating of it. But if what you want is a really stylish, elegant, med-style day boating platform, and perhaps a boat like a Fjord is a little too large or a little too pricey to be manageable for you, then what Schaefer's offering with his V33 is likely to be very tempting indeed.